We're going to Zimbabwe today by way of Ireland because why not? Food, wine, and travel writer Elizabeth Willoughby is joining us on today's Big Blend radio show to talk about her epic road trip through Zimbabwe. Apparently 21 days on the road. Like, that is super cool. Nancy and I know about it, traveling through Africa and living in Africa. And, it's interesting. Elizabeth lives in Ireland. I know she comes over to the States. She travels around quite a bit, and I'm so excited to hear about her journey. She is the publisher of the website WriteShots.com, and that's right as in a writer, W-R-I-T-E, so WriteShots.com. I encourage you to go there and look at all her amazing stories, not just travel, but food, wine, all kinds of good things. And also for nearly a decade, she was the author of Tales from the Road. It's an adventure travel page at worldguide.eu. She's also been a member of the International Food, Wine, Travel Writers Association since 2008, and she's also secretary and officer of the organization. And I encourage everyone, as always, to go to the website if you're in the world of food, wine, tourism, travel writing, blogging, photography. A great resource for everyone. Go to www.ifwtwa.org. We just say IFTWA all the time. So anyway, ifwtwa.org. Elizabeth, welcome. How are you?
Great. Thank you very much. What a good introduction.
I know. Well, we're excited to talk about your epic road trip because I think, African road trips, something always goes wrong, but that's really part of the adventure. And I know you had some flat tires, but you did something Nancy and I have never done. You went on a houseboat, and that is to me, that is super cool because I've always wondered about that. Where were you on the houseboat?
On Lake Kariba. So Lake Kariba is one of the largest man-made lakes in the world, and it's on the border. It's in northern Zimbabwe on the border between Zambia and Zimbabwe. And this, I have to say, was one of the highlights of the trip. It fortunately landed in the middle, so it was a nice break from tenting because out of our group, my husband and I were tenting, which is a lot of work and, as you can imagine, not luxurious. So this, the houseboat comes with, it comes with a captain. It comes with, to drive the boat. It comes with a cook to make your meals, and it comes with a deckhand. So really, really, because they know everything, you go out for your tours on the boat, and if you're for the people who want to fish, then these guys know where to go to catch the fish, and probably they come back with more fish than the visitors. So they know everything. So you're at they're at your beck and call. On the other hand, they just make it all work so perfectly because they know what they're doing.
That, it's true. I know from, having the different guides take us out, and I recommend anybody going on any kind of trip to Africa to have guides who can tell you because they live out there, and especially when it comes to wildlife, because I know you got to hang out with hippos and fishing eagles and crocodiles and all that great, wildlife that's there, and it's so, they know the sounds, they know the movements. But what were you doing putting your hands in the water to get Gail's hat? Yeah. What was that? You know better than that.
I do not know.
Crocodiles can get you, man.
It's really quite a self-reflection, I have to say. We had just finished talking about this, crocodiles following these boats, and then there goes Gail's hat into the water, and I thought about it, and I couldn't resist, so I don't know what that says about me, but I couldn't help but pulling it back out.
It means you're a traveler.
I think it's funny that you thought about it because one would expect that to be like a natural reaction, and then later you go, what did I just do?
I know.
So you did it the other way around. That's funny.
I know. I love this. And I want to tell everybody that you've got a wonderful article about your adventure up on nationalparktraveling.com. And it will also be featured in the February-March issue of Parks and Travel magazine, and so everyone, you'll get that on the same website. Just excited because you opened the doors for Africa for us in the magazine.
Yeah.
And because we were really focusing on America, and it just, it just doesn't. We can't have borders. We don't know anything about that. We know about just travel and go wherever. So it is really exciting to have Zimbabwe in there, and I think it's timely. Zimbabwe's been going through some interesting political change, and as all countries go through, quite frankly. And I think it's important that people realize the natural beauty and of these places, and to really don't just kind of not think of going to a country again because there's a change of government. And Africa will always have, we want a lot of change in government depending on where, but that's always going to happen out there. You know what I mean? So it's just not travel is my point with that.
Yeah, and this was Mugabe has been Robert Mugabe was the president for all of the history of Zimbabwe. Before that it was Rhodesia, and it wasn't him. So, this happened was basically within days of when we left Zimbabwe. When our trip had finished, they had their coup d'état and military coup d'état, and although it was bloodless, thank goodness, this is talking to the people there. You could really, not trying to be political or imposing outward views. They were very willing to talk, and it was difficult to talk to hear these stories of these people. The rangers in these national parks haven't been paid in 3 or 4 months, and they have to bring their own food in. They go home for a couple of weeks and then they go back. They have to bring 3 or 4 months worth of food in, and they're there on this campsite for with no refrigeration or anything like that. So it's extremely difficult, and hearing how they're very willing to talk about it, how they're surviving and their strategies. Like in one of the camps, this young man was trying to get his official ranger's license, and meanwhile, to get by, he's knitting hats and mitts and stuff to sell to tourists who are staying at the camp. And he was taught by an American lady who had visited the camp, and he gets donations from visitors of wool so he can continue knitting. So it's just it's very interesting, and it doesn't take away at all from the wildness of the place that you're in and why you go to a wilderness campsite such as that. So it's quite interesting, and you can't escape the politics, but it doesn't take away from it either.
Well, doesn't it change also that when you come home, having been there and talked to the locals, and it's these kinds of experiences, as from my life, I've always felt them to be very intimate because you're spending time with these people, the rangers, a lot longer, than sometimes in our parks in America. We're lucky as writers to get to hang out with park rangers all the time. They take us on hikes, and if they go with us, and every visitor in the park's trying to ask them questions because they're like the rock stars of our parks, And in Africa, those having guides and you're spending time with them. They're part of your journey. They really become part of it. So coming home back to Ireland, or whichever house you're in at the time, doesn't it kind of make you, when you see the news and everything, it's you have a more personal and more realistic look at it. Yeah, than what the talking heads have. Just someone reading the lines. And
certainly when you hear a newscast about I was really following the military coup d'état when we had left, and not totally surprised about it, but caring much more about it because I'd been there, right? And I've already sent 2 packages over to Godfrey of things that he'd asked for him. He was so specific, he would like this book and something to help him point out the constellations, which would be a part of his job when he gets his license, and wool for his knitting projects and stuff. So it's you really get it becomes very personal. So
You get attached to these people because they are so dedicated. I think, when we went to Africa, I led tours to Kenya. I think I led 3. And then I ended up living there because each tour I sent my people back, and I kept staying longer and longer there. I'm like, you really can't do that. It's like it's time to go home. And
only for
you get
so
attached.
long,
Because they live a very difficult life in a very beautiful place, and they are so dedicated. Even the children are so excited to go to school.
And resilient.
And it's so hard for them to get to school, and then having to pay for their uniforms is a huge, huge deal. And it means so much more to them. And then, you come back here or to the States. I'm not sure how it is in Ireland, but the kids are like, nah, I don't want to go to school.
Yeah. So it's interesting.
Honestly, I don't know how it is here in Ireland either. I've only been here for a little while, but it's like we bring gifts, and so that you're going to come across poverty when you go to Africa. It doesn't matter, where you go. If you're going on safari, you're going to come across communities that are impoverished. So when I went to Mozambique, I just brought a bunch of pens and pads of paper and coloring things. So you hand those out. This time, our leader brought Neil. He had planned anyways to go to a bunch of tennis places where tennis is played and competed in, and asking them for their leftover tennis balls, because once you have a competition, you can't reuse the balls, right? So to gather up those and like also little balls at dollar stores and things like that. And so we would be driving along in these remote roads, and out of nowhere would appear a whole bunch of kids walking to school in uniform, in bare feet, in filthy, dirty uniform, and they would just, their eyes would go, they would go bug-eyed, and their chins would drop. Like, what are these vehicles driving past us? Because we were a convoy, right? Not just one vehicle, but 4, and most of us with trailers, and then so we would just stop and throw out a whole bunch. We would see a group of kids that we could have enough balls, 1 per person, and just throw them out, and the kids would be running all over the place grabbing these balls, and it was just so wonderful for them because everybody got one, and completely unexpected, and there they are just on their way to school. You can't change their circumstances, but you can add as you're driving through a country, unless you're going to stay there and get political and so on, you can't fix their quality of life, but you can throw a little bit of fun into it, perhaps.
And it means so much to them. I mean, and I love that you're talking about tennis balls and pens and pencils, and that's sometimes people take candy, which that's great. But this is something that they really can utilize for, on and on and on.
Yeah.
And I think
I never throw candy. I mean, this doesn't help them at all. I mean, except give them cavities, and they don't have dentists, right? So something
and,
that will...
throwing food in the dirt.
Yeah,
it's kind of...
They used to have... I remember in Kenya and South Africa, a journalist would come over, and because they would do these sensational stories and not always get everything right, and they would find drums, where people were standing and getting warm, and it was on fire, like just like you would in go downtown New York or something. You'll see some of that too. Have those drums, the big metal drums on fire, and all standing around keeping warm, and they'll go and throw candy out there, take photos of the kids scrambling in the dirt, and take photos and put it up like starving kids in Africa. Yes, they are, but it was this. It was just it was demeaning. But it's just a really hard thing, because I don't think, like you're saying, we can't go into a country and fix their politics because we don't understand it. Even when we lived in Kenya and South Africa, every person of a different shade or background, different color, didn't matter. everybody has a different story, and it's so complicated and complex, and everybody makes sense. And so then everybody fights with each other.
It's probably not also our place to try and fix it. It's,
exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
But what can you do when you see something? I mean, for me personally, I need to do something. And you can't just drive through there and take without, giving something back. And so what could be useful in a small way, even if it's just, leaving them with a memory of something outside of their usual daily, routine or something. And it might be a tennis ball, but it also might be the idea that, wow, there are these machines that come through and they're carrying little houses, and houses on wheels that go somewhere, and where are they going and where are they coming from? Just you don't know what you're leaving behind there, but it's more than a candy, right? A candy, what does that do?
Nothing. I know.
It doesn't feed them even.
Kindness is really what needs to happen.
Connectivity, and you talk about the different, we call them huts, rondavels. Actually, it's interesting. A lot of my friends come from, I still say Rhodesia, Zimbabwe, but they, growing up in high school, a lot of, the whites bailed over, and it's like, everything's going on because there was a coup right before we got to South Africa, and we had, obviously, Rhodesians of African descent also have come over the border, but not as much as the white people were bailing. But now I know that it's Southern Africa, Botswana, Zimbabwe, there's change happening, and I'm hoping it's very positive. I really am, because it's just such a beautiful area, and the people, like we were talking about, are so nice. But you were talking about the houses, and it's interesting to talk, look at how they live. And I love that, the round houses in Kenya and in South Africa was always about if it's round so that evil spirits can't hide in corners. And so that's why they would do it round.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And it feels more natural.
It's cool.
To me, it's a more natural thing to do. I mean, if you look in ancient civilizations, a lot of things were circular, and it's fascinating. But so you got to see them actually moving houses, so they weren't always just starting from the ground up?
Well, we passed several, they had lots, like areas, and because we went at the most driest time of year, and we went deliberately at that time, so there was very little green, so it looked like, just a great big dirt patch, which I don't know what it looked like in a wetter time of year, maybe much greener. And on this lot were several rondavels. Is that what you called them?
Well, yeah, rondavels, yeah.
Okay. So, and, different sizes and for different purposes. Like some were off the ground, like on stilts. Because that's where they would, on the upper, raised floor, they would put their grains, and that would keep them safe from rodents or whatever. And then, there were some that they lived in, and probably several families lived in different rondavels on this lot or plot, and then it was completely surrounded with thicket, and for protection, or boundary lines. And then there would be this little pathway leading from there to the road, one way or another. And it was all very visible because of the time of year, like of the dryness of the year. So,
Man,
and some were being, in the process of being built, and some were older, but there was quite a variety. And it didn't look. It certainly didn't look like what we're accustomed in our households, but it didn't look as primitive, I think, as one would think with that description. I mean, it seems quite organized and quite clean and maintained,
There's a definite way of life, and it's simple living, but it makes sense. And sometimes it's more environmentally friendly than what we're doing. There's it just depends on how the water source and things like that and sewage. But just there's a one thing will be used 10 different ways. The functionality of things.
There's no wasting.
There's no wasting, and I think there's something to be learned from that. I definitely want to talk about the wildlife and being stuck in with the flat tire, because that always happens, because it's so cool.
Fun.
It's so much fun, and then people come out and help and do things. That's the thing. There's that really friendly. There's a hospitality that I can't even. That just I've never experienced outside of the continent of Africa. To be really bluntly honest, there's this hospitality. Well, Mexico too. It's just there's this genuine. Somebody broke down, I'm going to come and help you, and it's not necessarily be scared. Some places, yes, you need to be scared. Yes, there are things that happen. So I don't want to be, altruistic here, but, when you were talking with everyone and getting to know your guides and the cooks and the people that you're hanging out with, not on the boat, but also just on the actual road trip and setting up camp, was there this part of where, we talked about you sending things to Godfrey and understanding what he's wanting to do and understanding their side. Was there a side for them that they wanted to learn from you about what was like in Ireland or wherever you're living at the time? Because I know you go to South America too, all over Europe. So did they want to know what was going on outside of Africa?
It depended on the level of communication, which makes obvious sense. There was my guide at Great Zimbabwe. He was very interested in where I was from and how welcome my country was to immigrants because he couldn't. Yeah. He was dying to get out. He's a university student, but he saw no future for himself in that country and just wanted to because he knows so many people, and if you talk to a South African you'll know that how many Zimbabweans are going there for work and sending their money home. I mean, it was not an original phenomenon, of course, but Zimbabweans of means are trying to get out of Zimbabwe, but that might not be the same today. I mean, just in October they had this, they've got a new president. I don't know how, what changes are. They need to have a election this year, I think, and not sure what changes might come to them, but they're really starving for some changes, where some of the money that they're paying goes back into the people of the country.
It looks like a positive change, hopefully. We just hope. I mean, we look at places like Egypt and how you go yay, and the thing to me is also where even look at what happened in Catalonia. It's about people working together for something they believe in together. Positive change, and I think in that there's like a victory and a joy that we're steps ahead. But when you're thinking about day-to-day existence, it gets a lot deeper than that. So,
right.
But let's talk about the wildlife. I mean, what was it that compelled you to go to Zimbabwe?
The offer. We have friends who are South African, and they are Neil and Gail, who I mentioned in the article, and they are now sort of without a residence, and they travel around. Oh, wow. They spend a certain season in Africa, and they spend a season in Asia, and they spend a season in Europe, and so they're always on the move. And
how cool!
a couple of years ago, actually, I think 2010, they were doing a trip in. So because they're South African, they know the continent very well. Mm-hmm. And they were planning a trip to Mozambique in 2010, and we said, yes, please. So we joined them, and it was just a road trip. I mean, they have a 4x4 and a trailer for two, so, I always have to bring a tent. and it was a wonderful trip. Because I've lived in Brazil, I can speak Portuguese, and
cool.
Mozambique is Portuguese, a colony, Portuguese colony. So, and that was. I just feel that the best way to visit a country is with locals, and not only because they know the ins and outs, or mostly because they know the ins and outs, actually, but because you don't have to, because it's not tourist-like. And so you're just going there and you're just being, right? And you're just absorbing, seeing, processing. If you do it, you can see, of course, countries through a tourist agent organization, but then you're on a bus, and then you're with a bunch of strangers, and then you're on a particular agenda, and so on. Whereas if you go with a local or someone who's familiar with the place, it's a completely different experience. And so with these friends of ours, they were doing this epic trip through Zimbabwe, and we know that we travel well together already because of Mozambique. And, the trip that we did, I mean, it was like over close to 6,000 kilometers, I guess, and in 3 weeks. And it should have been 4 weeks, but yes. It would have been probably better if it were 4 weeks, but considering who was there, and like most of the people were not retired, some of half of the group only spent 2 weeks, and then they went back to wherever they came from, and the rest of us stayed on for 3. But those are that's the decisions that you make when you do the planning. Is
it's so cool to do those kinds of trips. Nancy and I did these road trips throughout Kenya in the bush, and you're going on these dirt roads, and and I do a lot of that part when we're on the tour here in the States, and driving those dirt roads, and there's a certain speed that you have to have with all the bumps, to just not be boom, 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 the whole time. There's an exact speed to it. You have to find it for each road, and something's always going to happen. And it's exhausting because you're jolting the entire time, and there's something that happens to your car. I know, like our car has to go in again. It's just like, here it is.
Yeah. It's exactly that plus dust.
That dust. The dust is like, I don't think I've ever been able to possess a clean car in my life, but it is this real satisfying thing once you get your tent up, which that's a whole other thing. But when you go to bed in a tent in Africa, I mean, did you hear hyenas? I have to ask that. I miss that so much. Did you hear them?
You miss it? Oh my God.
I miss the hyenas.
They're awesome.
And you're like, would you just shut up? We want to sleep.
I don't.
Really?
Did they scare you?
Yeah, I love the hyenas.
It's so weird. It's the weirdest
I
sound
think
ever.
you hear more hyenas, or I heard more hyenas in South Africa and Mozambique than I did in Zimbabwe. Actually, and giraffes were rather scarce as well. I don't know why. Lots of elephants, lots of antelope, and not that many lions, actually.
Yeah, they're in trouble.
But yes, you go to sleep at night, and I just wonder, why is this little piece of nylon protecting me? But anyways,
I know snakes. It's the snake factor.
I just have to say this, that the one tour that I led, where we were in tented camps, and we didn't have to put the tents up ourselves. They were rather permanent tented camps. They weren't put up and taken down every day. They're pretty good. They had nice flooring, kind of. It was luxury.
Yeah.
And we had this one girl that kept trying to padlock the tent to keep the elephants out. And we were just like, wow, man, we have a big job to do here to get this. Like if she said, because she thought somebody would go in and take her things, we could live with that one. But she just, we had to turn around once because she didn't padlock the tent. And, we spent hours trying to buy a padlock for the tent that would actually padlock the tent to keep the elephants out. And it was just the funniest thing. You're like, okay.
How's it padlock?
They probably won't be knocking.
But yeah, this is really interesting. But everybody has a different mindset, and when you go to somewhere so different from where you have been raised, it does blow your mind a little bit.
Yeah, was it?
But the elephants.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry, the elephants will even step over the guide wires. Like
I know
these. Yeah. It still I don't get it, but I realize it, but I don't know. I haven't absorbed it so much, perhaps. But they're not interested in the tent. They're not. They step over the guide wires. They go around. They may smell you in there, but they don't care because they look at the tent and they don't understand what to do with it. If you get out of your tent in the middle of the night to use the outhouse, however, you might never make it back to your tent. But don't. They're not interested in. They don't know what to do with the tent. They don't know what to do with the Jeep either.
Don't drink beer around the campfire, okay? Because when you do have to go potty in the middle of the night, like you're going to have to put something in your tent or you're going to have a bottle or something. Because I know about going out, like I remember it was in the Kalahari Desert.
Oh, gosh.
And we weren't camping yet at that point. But we had these little chalets. I know you stayed in chalets too. It's like a little duplex. So somebody was on the other side. And to go potty, you had to go outside to the little outhouse, which was at the fence. And the fence was like, up to my hip? I mean, it was like, why? What for?
Yeah.
And in the middle of the night, lo and behold, we had to go potty. And, Nancy we lived in the bush, like way out in the boonies, and she worked with Joy Adamson and, Elsa the Lion and all that stuff. And we should know, but we go potty, bring our flashlight, or torch, as you may say in Ireland. We get out there, and Nancy jumps in the bathroom on her own and, leaves me standing there outside. This is what mothers do. And I look around with the flashlight. I'm like, what? And I see these eyes, and I'm like, uh-oh. Finally, Nancy comes out, and seriously, as we're getting back into the chalet, you hear the roar. And when you hear the lion roar and you are out there, seriously, you may have to go back to the outhouse, but you're not, The next morning we heard the lady next door get up before everybody did and take her chamber pot, and you heard her just throw the goods right out there because she wasn't even going to go. She was already freaked out. People were scared because it can scare you, man. Lion roars they're deep.
Yeah. Well, they're not kidding. They don't live by our rules, right? They are not kidding. So you do not. This was the rule for this trip. You do not. You go into your tent at night from the fire, and you do not come out before dawn.
Yeah.
Period. For any reason.
Yeah. You have to. There's tools for that. So, Elizabeth, out of the wildlife, what to you? I mean, you have photos of fish eagles and hippos, and I mean, it's just amazing. You got to see a leopard. I mean, that is so cool because they're hard to find. A lot of times you'll find them in a tree with their kill.
Yeah.
But what was for you mind blowing? On
this trip, well, the leopard was precious. I don't think I've ever. I mean, I vaguely, barely in the end of a way field saw a leopard before in Kruger Park, I think, but never so close. And by close, I mean not that close, but I have a good zoom on my camera. That was really nice, and but I have to say, just sitting in Hoangi in our first camp, the camp felt like a parking lot. Actually, there was nothing special about it, but it had a nice outlook over a water hole, and man-supplied water hole. And because of the time of year, which, as I said before, was why we went at this time, everything came there. So it was, I mean, you could sit there for 12 hours and just be constantly wowed. It didn't matter if it was a bird of prey, a flock of birds, and a kudu coming, a herd of kudu. Or,
the kudu were awesome. I miss them.
Oh my gosh! You know, and the dusk came in. The elephants, one herd from this side, another herd from that side, and you know, a couple of individuals over there, and it's just you just sit there and watch this wild life, and it's just. It's not gobsmacking. It's just wonderful, you know. Like it's just it touches your insides because it's natural and it's real. I don't really know how to describe it, but it's not a zoo.
Once you set foot in Africa, there's like it becomes part of the dirt never leaves. Yeah, the dirt never leaves your fingernails, right? I really believe that.
Yeah.
And I know manicurists have tried, but it doesn't work with me. But it's just there's a thing with that because I think there's when you're out in real pristine the natural world and you see things that are just you're awed. You're in awe. You know, I know when we went to Sequoia National Park and you know I was talking to the park ranger and you go a few times you've been there back and forth and you know people slam on their brakes in front of you because of a sequoia tree, and she goes, you know, and you get a little irked, and she's like, no, they're in awe. They see it all day long. People just, they just tune out of everything, and I think when the place can do that to you, where you just, it's like we all battle to meditate, you know, well, some don't, but there's that thing of monkey mind chatter in your mind, you know, everything's going blah, 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 and you can't meditate, but places like that, I think you become really part of the universe in a different way. There's just this natural connectivity, and it's incredible.
It makes
so
you
glad
think
you went.
From a whole different perspective. You know, and it makes you feel different about things when you get back to where you live, and you I think you relate to things in a totally different way, and you relate to things you never thought you would relate to. Like before, if you heard anything about a coup somewhere in Africa, you'd be like, okay, well, there they go again, and not care. Now you care. That's why travel is so important.
What got you started in travel and then travel writing?
In travel, well, I grew up on my father's boat or my parents' boat. My father was an adventurer, and my mother went along with it and dragged us kids, I guess. And so it was always, you know, not a fishing boat and not a cruiser, just a sailboat, and so moving from place to place.
Is this out of Ireland or where? Where were you born?
No, I'm Canadian.
You're Canadian? I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. And then my partner got a job in Brazil, and my partner is German.
Cool.
He was my boyfriend at the time, so yeah. So we moved to Brazil, and we went there because of his job. So it's not so, you know, when you go to a different country, it's not automatic that you'll be able to get hired because, you know, they don't want foreigners. Countries don't want foreigners displacing their own people. And so if I were to get a job in Brazil, it would have to be for something that another Brazilian can't do. Right. So the obvious thing was teaching English. So I was teaching English, and well, at first I took a course with Cambridge University to get my certificate, and some knowledge on how to teach English, and was teaching as a second language, and but I found that I wasn't learning any Portuguese because I was speaking English all day, and so I decided to get a job in Brazil, and so I did that for a year and found out that I didn't really fit into the Brazilian working culture, and purely cultural reasons. And after a year, my Portuguese was pretty good, but I found that I wasn't very happy. And so I did. Do you know this book called What Color Is Your Parachute?
That sounds familiar. That sounds. And
it's about many generations old, and it's just about answering a bunch of questions and doing some tests and things about yourself, research, and discovering what your skills are and what you like, and then you can, if you're going to be working, you might as well, if you're going to spend so many hours a day working, you might as well be doing something that you like to do and that you're good at. And so this book is designed to help you figure out what that is for each individual, and then, try and help you find that, how to find a job doing that. And so I did it. My mother tried to make me do it when I was 16, and I thought it was stupid, but when I was 30-something, I thought it was a good idea. So I did that. And in every aspect, it was, I should be researching, I should be photographing, and I should be writing. And so it became basically a no-brainer. Like, here I am in Brazil, gee, what should I do? So I got a job with the Sao Paulo newspaper called Sunday News, which is a bilingual newspaper, English and Portuguese, and to do 2 columns. One was on travel writing, and the other on culture clash from a Canadian woman's perspective, which was supposed to be funny. And, that's what got me into writing.
Very cool. And now, you've
travel writing for a career.
Yeah, now you've done so much. And again, everyone can go to writeshots.com, and I encourage you to go there and get connected with your stories. And one thing I want to say, because you've been with the International Food, Wine, Travel Writers Association since 2008. That's a long time. That's 10 years. So what was it, what is it that keeps you being part of it? I know that you're an officer as well and a secretary for the organization and the board. What is it that keeps you going, like, this is a cool organization? What are the main benefits for you?
Well, first of all, I must clarify that since 9 days ago, I am not on the board anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been replaced by I was the secretary on the board, and now it's Ariana Morrison, who is the secretary. So, but I'm obviously still a member, and what keeps me with IFTWA is the networking. It's because I don't live in the United States, so I don't meet IFTWA members personally very often. Actually, very rarely. But on I've been on, let's say, at least two, anyways, media trips through IFTWA, and met some. And these two trips were very, very key for me, actually. But nevertheless, being on the board when I was on the board and networking through the organization has been very good for me in securing jobs or securing contacts for interviewees for articles or getting ideas due in certain places. It's just... Until I joined IFTWA, so I've been a travel writer for quite a number of years, and absolutely everything I did, every day, every minute of every day, I had to figure out myself, find myself. Even, when I was living in Brazil, there wasn't, it was a few years before there was regular internet, and until I left there, which was the end of 2003 or the beginning of 2004, there was still no fiber. So researching stuff was very arduous, and time-consuming and limited, like very, very limited. So, I met a couple of Americans in Brazil, but anything that I wanted to do, I had to, including how to pitch a letter or whatever, everything that I know about travel writing, I learned by trial and error. But now, as part of IFTWA, there's just it's like a library at my fingertips. So if I want to know something, here's a person who lives there, or here's a person that I know. Do you have any contacts there who could open a door for me, or give me somebody's name who I can pick their brain, or something like that. So it's like part of a like-minded group all of a sudden that
nice.
is interested in sharing information. Not a group where everybody's hiding all their cards, but a group that's just, oh, I know somebody who could do that. Oh, I know somebody who knows that. Oh, just it's just really refreshing and friendly and open. So that's why I was interested in getting onto the board of IFTWA and why I'm still there.
Right on. That's awesome. It's a good thing, because I know we talk about networking, and then a lot of times it's at conferences, and then people having IFTWA friends and members in their same location. So it's a different point of view. It's nice to hear. And everybody, again, it's ifwtwa.org, and I encourage you to go there. Anybody in the world of food, wine, tourism, travel writing, blogging, photography, definitely a good resource. And thank you so much, Elizabeth, for joining us. Again, her website is writeshots.com, and her article on her road trip through Zimbabwe will have photos and everything in there too. Is up on nationalparktraveling.com, as well as in the February-March issue of Parks and Travel magazine, which you can get at nationalparktraveling.com. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me, Lisa and Nancy. It's been great talking to you.
You too. Happy travels.
Thanks. You too.
All right. Bye-bye.
Take care.